Just going to confirm that working. Yes.
Got it. Thank you, Elena. Yes, welcome everyone. What collaborative funding makes possible, celebrating 8 years of Cobudget. Welcome. My name is David. I'm partner at Greater Than, part of the Cobudget team. And I have the honor with my colleague Elena to welcome you in the name of the Cobudget team for this event. And I will be guiding us through the next 90 minutes. Yes, 8 years is a while and a lot has happened since 2014. And we would like to use this opportunity today to look back, to appreciate where we're coming from, but also looking where we headed with this new team that is working on Cobudget now. And it was and always is very energizing for us and exciting for us and nourishing for us to really see how and what for people and organizations and communities are using Cobudget for. So this is really what collaborative funding makes possible. So we are really happy that today 4 of you agreed to join us for a conversation. So yeah, thanks a lot for being here with us today, Dani, Wanda, Diana, and Jakob. And yeah, thanks for joining us today to share around your learnings, around your insights, and yeah, to really share and learn together. Unfortunately, last minute, Linus from the city of Malmö couldn't make it in the end, but thankfully Jacob, who is facilitating the process together with him, actually stepped up in this here with us today, I think. So yeah, of course, we're also curious what actually brought everyone else here today. So maybe before starting, we could do a little async check-in together. So maybe let's use the chat here, the Zoom chat, for checking in together by completing this sentence. I am here today because. And whenever you have your answer, please don't hit enter yet, as we're going to do this in a chatterful way and seeing this answer, all those answers together. But maybe let me know with a thumbs up when you have your answer. Okay, can I see some thumbs if you have your answers? Yes, I see Judith, I see. Okay, that's most of you, at least from what I can see from the first side. So on 3, let's hit enter together. 1, 2, 3, and let's go. Thanks so much for sharing. Wonderful. So without further ado, I'd actually like to hand over to my colleagues, Hugi and Francesca, to shine light on Cobudget history and also what might expect us in the future. Of course, we will have the chance also to address questions to all presenters and also the panelists later on. So feel free, whenever you have a question, to put it in the chat and we will collect them and address them at the end of today's session. Over to you.
Thanks, David. I'm super excited to be here with Hugi to finally share a little bit more about Cobudget's past, present, and future. And yeah, I'm especially excited because I think it's quite an interesting story and one that's a little bit different from maybe a lot of open source projects where we maybe see projects fork over time, so split out into lots of different streams. Versus in this case, actually, the story is really 2 paths that have come together from quite different starting points and 2 different communities that have actually merged into one tool and one brand and one project. So yeah, I guess just really briefly before Hugi and I both sort of share about each of those like past origins. I guess I just wanted to sort of, give a quick sense in terms of how did we get to where we are right now, and what is the Cobudget that we're building? Because in a way, in both cases, the way Cobudget emerged was really as a practice that was really coming out of a couple communities that were experimenting with new ways of making decisions, distributing leadership. And in both those cases, it was always open source, it was very collaborative, it was transparent. And like from the beginning, the idea was really to, let's say, walk the talk, if that's the word we can use, and build the technology and the practice through the lived experience of those communities. And so what actually happened about a year ago, a little bit more than that, is that Hugi and I, we had met through a couple different communities, but we basically both realized that we were very passionate about how to build technology differently, how to not have to go down the sort of venture-backed startup route to build technology, but instead really that we both cared a lot about how can we actually build infrastructure that is a commons and that can really be sustainably maintained and help organizations, networks, communities that want to organize more collectively. And so we realized from that sort of shared mission that we both have, that actually we were holding different threads that would be really interesting to join together. And so actually in May last year, we brought together both of our teams and then sort of started exploring, could we actually work on this together and merge these two different platforms into one tool. And so that's what we ended up deciding to do and have been working on sort of in the background for the last year. And so that's why we're just really excited to now sort of come out and share this more broadly where we've gotten. And also especially because we're really trying to develop this technology and this practice further with a very ecosystemic approach. So basically trying to build on the strengths of each other and of other organizations out there that are doing similar things, so that we don't have to try to do everything perfectly, but instead find collaborators to work with to basically sort of grow the ecosystem around Cobudget and other similar tools. So I guess one thing I just want to note as an example is Open Collective that Hugi will also say more about later, that is already becoming a really strong partner and a super exciting collaboration in terms of some other important infrastructure in this space of new ways of organizing, and that we're trying to see how can we work together as partners in growing this technology in a different way. So I think with that is sort of like the general idea of what we're trying to do. I think I'm gonna hand it over to Hugi to dive into one of the streams of Cobudget's origins, and then I'll share about the second one. Over to you.
So it's my screen shared now. The slides are up. Excellent. Yeah, right. I'm going to take us on a little journey. As Francesca said, it's sort of, there's an origin story now of Cobudget having come really from two directions and synthesized into one thing. And this is the first time we really get to sit down and tell that new origin story to everyone. So we were going to take you through sort of those two journeys that joined in May last year. And the one that I'm going to focus on at the beginning comes from my end. It really starts at a place called the Borderland. The Borderland is called so because it is supposed to be the borderland between dreams and reality. And according to some crazy hippies in a quarry, that's how that place looks, at least similar to that at that point. The Borderland had really lofty ideas for how it wanted to co-create ever since it started. The first real year was 2011. And right from the start, the idea was that people would not just come together and co-create this festival 1 week of the year. The idea from the start was that sort of lived on throughout the year as an ongoing collaborative practice of creativity and prototyping. And right from the start, there was this idea of something called the Dreams platform. People would go in and they would propose a project that they wanted to do at the borderland. And these projects didn't necessarily have to come with a budget. A lot of it just had to do with making people excited and aware of what you wanted to do. And this is that from 2014, but the Dreams platform actually existed in 2011. It didn't really have any co-budgeting or anything of that sort. The only participatory thing that you could do as somebody who was not uploading your own project was just to click the vote button. And that was it. But you could get engaged in other people's projects through just seeing them on the platform. And you could, as somebody who had a project, also ask for grants to carry that project out. Of course, at the start, the borderland being quite small, there wasn't that much money to be had. But as the borderland grew, it started to become more and more of an issue to understand how do we distribute this money that we have so that as many of these projects can be realized as possible, while still understanding that we don't have infinite resources and sometimes priorities have to be made. But by 2015, that was actually a 41-page document of applications to distribute 20,000 euros by committee. It wasn't really sustainable anymore, and it was starting to cause quite a lot of friction in the community, quite frankly. So an idea started to rise up about, okay, can we do this differently and crowdsource it and actually make the whole process participatory? And at the same time, then also solving this problem of scalability while still not doing what a lot of other large festivals do and say that, like, look, if you want small money, you got to fundraise that yourself. You're not going to get it through the main channels. You know, only the big projects can apply for that money. It's not what we wanted to do. So in 2016, we built this platform, or we launched it for the Borderlands 2016, and it was similar to the old one, except now we spread out the responsibility to go distribute that funding to the participants themselves. It was a very simple thing, looked like this, ugly as nails, built completely bootstrapped with only volunteer resources, and it worked. It worked well enough that people could use it, and it was an improvement on the old system. We also, of course, made it open source, and it actually sort of took off as a little weird open source project and got forked a bunch of times. It ended up being used, namely at an equivalent sort of festival in Israel, where they took it and rewrote about 70% of the code. And the next year in 2017, we just took that code and we ran with that, and we created our own version of it. And, you know, thank God, because the borderland had grown by that point. And that's the quarry that you see right there at that point. So there was certainly need for better technology. So suddenly we had this pretty good sort of internal Kickstarter participatory budgeting tool that was really geared towards making people think about and collaborate with each other on the dreams that they had. But we didn't really stop there in terms of just co-budgeting. We also did basically participatory reviewing of the projects. So of course, there's some guidelines to what can get funded and what cannot. That used to be vetted by a little committee. But again, we thought we could do better. And we said that, like, look, let's just distribute that vetting to the community itself. And being the borderland, we could get away with being very playful. So this was the first version of that. It was just these little monsters that you clicked and they got very angry if you wanted to say that something was breaking a guideline. You told the reason, and then it was sort of resolved. Platform was very playful. We could do that, of course, because we didn't have to really adapt to any other use cases. And it really worked. The Borderland grew in membership between 2016 and 2019 to just over 3,000 participants. And the budget sort of grew to, grew basically relative to the number of participants. And participation of those members in dream granting was pretty staggering. If you know anything in participatory processes, getting people involved can be hard. But we actually reached just around 50% of the total participants of the Borderland participated in distributing the money to the projects. So I think that was a very big success. Now, because we could look at those like successes and because we saw that there was potential in this, we went to some Swedish innovation granting agencies, one for culture and one for really technology entrepreneurship. And we asked for some money to develop this tech. And there were good calls available for civic tech, where something open source and participatory really fit in. So we got enough money to really build a new version of it that could be multi-tenant, that could accept multiple organizations using it, something that could really be software as a service and be used by people around the world. And that's where we are now. That's what we've built. That's what the Borderland uses today. And that's what now is called Cobudget, because of this amazing story that Fran hinted at before. And now I'm handing over to Fran to tell the other path.
Yes, exactly. So at the same time as all of this was happening in Denmark and in a bunch of other communities, at the other end of the world, all the way in New Zealand, there was the Inspiral network. And Inspiral actually started also around 2010. And it really was at first sort of a network of, it was always called people that are working on things that matter and want to spend more time working on things that matter. But basically lots of social entrepreneurs, freelancers, people that wanted to start their own business, but that wanted to support each other to do that. And so what was really interesting about Inspiral is because of how it was set up, they really became a sort of incubation lab for lots of new practices around participatory governance, both when it came to the actual practices, but also when it came to software, because there was actually a lot of developers that were part of that collective. And so one of the main areas that actually Cobudget sort of emerged out of was something called Inspiral Services at the time. And that actually was sort of like a web development cooperative that was providing services around web development. And so you can see here, this is Alana Irving, who was one of the members of Inspiral and Inspiral Services, and was really one of the people that drove a lot of the sort of innovation around these practices related to money. And as you can sort of see in this crazy drawing here, there was like a lot of different pieces that were starting to be developed that people were just experimenting with, like, what is the infrastructure we need to sort of run a distributed web development co-op at the time. And so part of that was things like My Inspiral, which was like sort of having your own parallel bank account and fictional money. And one key piece within that was the evolution of Cobudget, which really actually started out as a big spreadsheet and some first experiments that Alana had kicked off around participatory budgeting that was very laborious and involved a lot of copy pasting and basically a lot of manual labor. And so because of that, and due to the fact that there were so many developers in Inspiral, we could sort of see as it matured and as the practices that Inspiral was using, they were beginning to actually codify them in technology. And so it's quite interesting actually to look so specifically in the case of Cobudget, there was a need for sort of a process that made it easier for people to engage with the budget, but really also somehow not having too much of a mental load on people in doing that. And so that was where the technology came in to somehow simplify and make this more accessible. And so that wasn't only happening in the area of money, but also there's a tool called Lumio that people have maybe heard of, which is a consent decision-making tool. And then there's also things like the Inspiral Handbook and all these different areas where people were basically developing software to support the practices that were emerging. And so from that, finally then, in 2014, the first version of Cobudget as a piece of software actually was launched. There's a great little video online that you could see by this woman, Charlie, sort of announcing the launch of it. And you can sort of see some screenshots of what it used to look like. And in comparison to the Borderland example, we can see that this is much more like focused on the finances. It's a more sort of a rational, clean looking tool, less like creativity and craziness, but more like looks like a financial tool, let's say. And so then going from this first prototype, if you go 2 years later, we actually had a guy called Derek Razzo and Eugene Lynch that also managed to raise some grant funding from a philanthropic organization, and were able to build a new version of Cobudget that you can see here in the screenshot, that sort of is the one that actually, I would say, I and my colleagues in Greater Than started working with then in 2017. So we can see that then that actually is the Cobudget that many of you who've been using it have been familiar with, and which of course has now changed. But basically, this is the Cobudget the way it was until basically March this year. We can see here like some screenshots of Inspiral, and also WeShare, which is the network through which I actually got to know Cobudget, because that was the group where we were experimenting a lot with money and got excited about it. But basically, the way that I actually got into this project is that in 2017, I started Greater Than as a collective, and was really interested in focusing on the topic of money in like new ways of organizing. And so we actually took on the stewardship of Cobudget. We sort of took it from Inspiral and said, hey, we're gonna try to get it to its next phase, because it wasn't being held at the time anymore from those people that were there previously. And so that's basically what then got us to today. So now basically you can see, since we did the shift that I told you about earlier, and Hugi and I decided that we were gonna try this merger, this is now the new Inspiral page on Cobudget, where actually a round is happening right now. And so that's sort of, yeah, the full circle of what got us to where we are now. And I mean, I guess one thing that's maybe just also worth mentioning is that the approach that I and really everyone in Greater Than has come to this from has always really been focused on the practice. So Cobudget really being a codification of the practices around collaborative funding that we want to see. And so this is really the larger mission that we're all here for, which is how we can spread those practices more as a way to really shift how money and power flows in society. And so that's what we're hoping to sort of grow out from here. But with that, I'll hand back to Hugi to tell us a bit more about what's actually coming next, or where we are now and what's coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Fran. So, right, so now we sit here with the new Cobudget, which already has this platform, which we've now invested in for the last couple of years in order to get it to a place where we think it can be really useful, and where you can just register and sign up and create your own organization. So what's ahead now for Cobudget? Well, this is sort of what we think is like the theory of change, or like the way we want people to think about it. These three pillars of doing this. One of them is to dream together. And remember, that was sort of the origins of the Borderland, the Dreams platform, the ideation, the creativeness, the ideas of dreaming together of what could be possible, right? And then you have the funding together, the part which is about making it realizable, but breaking it down into budgets, understanding what's needed, making sure that the people who can make that happen have the resources they want, and make sure that the people who can know what's best to allocate to get those resources to allocate. And that's the fund together part. And that's really where the Inspiral Cobudget started from. So it's so great that these two are coming together like this at these two pillars. And then the last one is to be able to realize these projects. And that's where we also hope this Cobudget is going to grow, both in terms of being able to follow up on the platform, but also in terms of being able to understand how is this money then being spent for this project. And that's what we want to look at a little bit, how we're going to achieve that. One thing I just want to announce right now is that, Cobudget, neither of these implementations never had any way for you to be able to actually get new money in. It was always the case that we assumed that you already had some sort of money in your community that you had fundraised through some other means, and that's the money that you distributed through Cobudget. Well, we've built something now that makes it possible for you to raise money directly to your ideas, or to buckets as they're called on Cobudget. So this feature is still in beta phase, but it will be possible now to just use your card, go into a bucket and fund that directly if you want to fill it up with more money that the organization currently doesn't have. And we think that this is a very cool and innovative way for people to be able to fundraise for community projects, not just fundraising now just for the organization as a whole and what it might do, but very specifically asking people to put money towards specific goals. And we think that that's going to be a pretty attractive offer. But there's also the whole point that where does that money end up, right? I mean, it relies on you having the ability to open a bank account, some sort of nonprofit or some sort of organization that can hold that money. Not everyone has the ability or time or willingness to do that. And this is where it's so great for us to work with Open Collective, which is why these two things fit together super well. So if you have your own bank account, fine, we'll hook up Cobudget to the independent organizational sort of payment platforms that can handle those payments and payouts, right? But if you don't, then what we want to do is integrate it with Open Collective so that you can be fiscally hosted by a fiscal host in Open Collective and still be able to receive money directly from people through Cobudget that ends up on Open Collective where you can manage the money. So what we sort of get is this, right? We get an ecosystem where we imagine that Open Collective is the way in which your community achieves financial sustainability, right? And Cobudget becomes the place in which you dream and allocate resources. It is really the place in which, you know, the sort of, so what should we do with the money? That whole step comes in there. And then Open Collective comes in again to help you make sure the money gets to where it needs to go, right? So these tools together really fit amazingly well. And the way we like to think about it sometimes is that really, you know, DAOs are all the rage right now for very good reason. They allow us to do really cool stuff. But we don't necessarily need to do that with crypto on the blockchain. We think that this is, in some ways, the equivalent of doing a DAO in existing systems, but with innovative tools that make it possible for you to do it really well. So that's sort of our idea for where this could be going as an ecosystem. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Fran.
I just want to add one more last thing on that. Which is that basically, so part of this ecosystem could obviously be many other tools in addition to Open Collective. So there's sort of like, we see this as a huge like opener for many different collaborations that could happen around this. And this is also why we've decided that, so Cobudget has become an independent cooperative in Sweden. So we actually just got the bank account. And the idea is that that's really where the open source code lives, like that's where the tool is. And then around that, we can really develop this ecosystem of individuals working on it, but also partner organizations that are basically supporting with different pieces. And so that's sort of how we've evolved the relationship now of these different organizations to each other. And so Greater Than is an example of one of them that's also really focused on giving the support services around how to actually do this collaborative governance. But basically, Cobudget now is its own co-op. So I just wanted to add that. But
certainly, 100%. Thanks.
Yes. And back to you, David, though.
Thanks a lot, Hugi. Thanks a lot, Francesca, for sharing this story with us. I'm actually happy to welcome now on stage some people who are with us in Cobudget story at this very specific moment of time. And using this tool and having made experience with this tool. I'm happy to welcome Dani Häuser, who is Freshwater Officer at WWF Switzerland, Wanda Francesca Christ, Project Coordinator at the Borderland, the festival that you heard about before, Diana Monsberger, Community Builder at Blivande, and Jacob Scott, the Process Facilitator at Malmö till Sammans, which is a EU-funded collaboration, including the city of Malmö. Welcome, everyone. Great that you are here with us and that you made the time. So how about starting with a small round of introduction? So what is actually your collaborative funding story? So how did you get to use Cobudget, and what did it maybe make possible that hasn't been before? So whoever feels like starting can just start. and we can then move to the next person so we get a bit of an idea who is actually here with us today.
Okay, I start. I'm Danny from Switzerland. WWF has a little bit different organization in Switzerland. We have about 24 different WWFs in Switzerland, regional WWFs with their own bank accounts, with their own volunteer communities, with their own border, with their own regional director. And I'm leading these regional directors. I'm the head of the regional work. And the problem was there were many projects, many good ideas, but everywhere, somewhere in Switzerland, and some had money and some had ideas, and I had money as well in my budget, but where we had to find out where does the money goes, and we had also a lot of documents, and we had formulas, and they could send formulas to me, and I could give them money for their projects, and there was just at one level we found out that's not how it should work. We should be more open. We should, as you said, we should dream together. We should show our project. We should learn from our project. We wanted to have something like a marketplace where we could put our project into a window and others could realize, wow, that's cool. Steal from the best. We want to copy that. We could do that in the other region as well. And another person or other organization, WWF regional organization, could say, I have 2,000 Swiss francs. I could support that project. I like it. And that's where we started to think about what could help us to organize our work a little bit more open, more just together possible somehow. And that's why we found at the end Cobudget and work for the last 3 years, I think, or 2 years with Cobudget, and try to put all these great projects into the window. Our next step would be to open it up to our whole community of volunteers.
You switched to mute, Danny. We cannot hear you anymore.
We didn't do that at the moment because we thought about let's stay in the organization for the first year or for the first moment. We have some associated volunteers in the community, but not everyone else. And that would be our next step.
Thanks so much for sharing, Danny. I saw you unmuting before, Jacob. Do you want to go next?
I can go next. My name is Jacob Skote. I'm an architect, also been a part of the Borderland Festival that Hugi told you about since a long time. So it's been really nice seeing the two like start from our side, then like starting as this little seed in Borderland, how to make that more like co-creative, and then like grow into this thing that is actually used by a lot of organizations all over the world, and now merging with the Cobudget organization to really give it more weight. I've been really interesting since we started to use it to see how this tool could help citizen participation in cities. Currently, like most of, at least in the Swedish context where I operate, most citizen participation work by a sort of like suggestion box model, you know, where people send in a suggestion to some sort of municipality office that read that, and then nothing happens really. But then I kind of saw a potential in using Cobudget as a way of bringing in ideas to the municipality or to whoever's like responsible, and then also distribute funds to different ideas through that platform. And that's exactly what we're doing with Malmö Tillsammans, which is really fun. It's an organization, it's like a group of organizations, a EU-funded project that's trying to bring together organizations that are all working with enhancing and strengthening citizen participation in the city of Malmö in southern Sweden. And they basically approached us because they were trying out different tools to see which tools would fit the best to do these kind of projects, basically. And we've been running different experiments with them for the past year or so, a bit less than that. Some of them I can maybe go into more detail later, but mainly using it as a way of like getting people to think more about the city, to start with like, okay, what can I actually contribute with to my city? And then getting it from idea to actually being implemented or funded. It's a bit different from the other Cobudget contexts, since in most cases, it's not the idea creators themselves that actually create the idea. They just put up the idea, and then someone else, an idea owner, will come in and say, oh, this is great. I can actually fund this and make it happen.
Thank you, Jacob. You want to go next, Wanda?
I will go next. Thank you. My name is Wanda Christ.
And I got through this, or got to use Cobudget through Borderland. I've been part of the Borderland community since 2016. I have seen the old Dream website, like seeing screenshots brings back good memories. And then this year, Hugi suggested to use Cobudget instead. And we had very little time this year to set up the Dream process. There was already quite the pressure, and I was really happy as someone, I'm not very tech savvy. I don't do much co-creative work in my professional life, and it was really, really easy to get into it. And it also worked very well with the 2,345 users in the end that joined the platform, uploading more than 160 projects. It all went really smoothly. So I was very relieved, and it was a nice process. And thank you, Hugi, for the nice introduction about the Dream process and Borderland. It fulfills several functions. I think very important is also just presenting your project, presenting your dreams, and get in contact with others. And then also one thing that I didn't think much about that turned out really great was usually in the old platforms we had votes. You can give like 10 votes in total. And this year we handed out actual money. So you could choose how much you give to each project with a certain cap. And that led to something that sometimes people just gave 5 kronor, like 50 cents to one project, which doesn't mean like much, but we could see total votes. Maybe they didn't reach their total, but we see like 100 people actually went in and took their time to give a little bit of their funds to this project. It was like this popular vote, how many people in total voted. So that was a nice extra feature, I think. Last, I'm excited about the new function of direct like donations to one project. I think that's going to be really great in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanda, for sharing. Diana, over to you.
Yeah, I also felt a little bit nostalgic when I saw the little monster, the angry monster and the happy monster. Good times. I use Cobudget probably at least every other day in our community house, House Blivande. We use it for many different things, and I think a little bit later I will go into what is, for example, how we use it for curation of gallery content or curation of container projects in our container square, Frihamnstorget. But more the traditional way of using it, we use it for deciding what equipment we will get in the makerspace. We also kind of make it available for different organizations within our organizational ecosystem. We have a nonprofit organization called Noden that has also requested their own Dreams platform. And I must say that I didn't realize, but I feel very spoiled because over the entirety of my involvement in community's life, there has been something similar to the Dreams platform of Cobudget. So I had actually never to struggle with this like huge documents full of either text or tables. But I guess this is what you get. I'm really happy that I hadn't have to. I'm looking forward to talk a little bit more in detail about the uses.
Thanks so much, Diana. And as we are all users or facilitators here of this platform, of course, I think people are also curious, like, what is maybe also challenges that we encountered when doing co-budget rounds or when facilitating a process like that? What were maybe also things that we learned that we now do maybe differently? Maybe some of us would like to share around that.
I would like, I can keep going for a bit.
Please, yes.
So two main challenges pop to mind, and the one is actual engagement, because everyone that knows platforms, going into one additional platform, no matter how easy you make it for people or for the user experience, is this enormous step for many, many people. So it's been really important to keep the threshold of dreams. Either it is because people have a chance to receive something very big at the end, or on voluntary basis, like at the Borderland, or the description of the dream has to be so short that someone can write it down and publish within 3 minutes. So that's a little bit like the challenge of participation. That was the second one, the making it super simple to access the dreaming process.
I can latch on to that. Say that since we in Malmö Tillsammans are working mainly with people who aren't very tech savvy, we have a lot of projects with elderly homes and young children out in the suburbs. So the main way for us to get people on the platform is through workshops, as you mentioned, Diana. We have very, very little participation that happens outside of these dedicated workshops. But what Cobudget allows is to become like an archive as a repository of the ideas that are created in this workshop. So you don't need to have every member participate in every workshop, but still get their voice heard in all of the workshops, which is really, really great, I think.
I also agree. Engagement was a struggle. Reaching everyone, letting them know about this new system. I think we ended up at like kind of half manually adding each email address of each member to the website, which took a while, but worked out well. And I think we actually reached a new record in participation this year, which I'm very proud of the community. We also gave an extra incentive. I mean, here you can give actual money. So for the people that have a dream themselves, they are the first ones signing up. They have to make their budget, make their dream, but also they're the ones that are participating. But then we also had a system that we handed out the total amount of our dream budget to everyone. And after a certain while, we took the leftovers, so the people that didn't spend their money, we used that and redistributed it again. So the very engaged one, they got extra money to spend in the end to keep them engaged, and also give an incentive to be engaged from the beginning because they got less and less with each step. I think that worked quite well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that tips and tricks with us, Wanda. Is there maybe other ways that we experienced or learned how to increase engagement? Something that you saw in the communities that you're active in, Dani, Diana, Jacob?
Constantly advertising. I'm constantly having. I mean, I'm just talking with everybody. Please go on Cobudget. Please go on Cobudget. I go into these regional community meetings, online or in person, and I say, don't forget Cobudget. There are a lot of good projects on it. Please check it. And I have the same problem as well. I mean, and by environmental work, environmental protection in Switzerland, there are a lot of old people in these communities and boards, and they don't like passwords. They don't like platforms. They like meetings and paper, and it makes it very hard sometimes to get these people on board. Some do delegate it as well to their regional directors. That's fine for me as well, as long as sometimes they make screenshots and bring it on paper to these meetings and show it to the elderly, to the older environmental volunteers, and it's okay. I mean, I don't say it has to work like this or that, like that. It's important for me is that we show the projects, that everybody can see the project. But it is, for me, it's a struggle. So I see if I'm active, if I'm the animator, goes on, and if I'm on holidays or away, like, traffic goes down. But that's okay. I mean, for us it works, and projects are coming in, people are looking at the project, people copy projects, and that's what matters for me. The point is, I don't have one festival or one focal point. I have all year round projects coming, and it's ongoing, and I have to remind people. But it's very cool, because what happens is that people engage, and we have 4 languages in Switzerland, so people start to traduce in Italian, in French. So then they write emails, they send a little, I don't know, a cake or something. Hey, please spend for my project. It's a lot of personal work and personal exchange going on. That's really good for us, because we have to connect these different regional communities with each other. And it's a little step in this direction, but I hope it will be much better in the future. We are working on it.
Thanks. And we're also curious. I mean, sometimes it's just very little things in the process that can have a huge impact. By tweaking something very small, engagement can go up, maybe while also handing in of project of dreams, or funding can go up. So I'm curious, what were maybe little tweaks that you already did in your experience on Cobudget that really made a huge difference?
Or maybe one point that helped as well is that you can imagine that WWF gets also inherits money. If somebody dies, we get money. These regional groups get money, and sometimes if it's a lot of money, they have to come to the main WWF, and we have to discuss what they are going to do. And what I start now is that I say, okay, you have to invest part of this money on Cobudget in other organization. That's really cool because they're forced to invest $30,000 or whatever in the next year into other projects. That's really cool. So they have some little motors there going on.
Wanda, Diana, Jacob, anything on your side?
I think what will help for Borderland is if we, for once, stay with one website, where we stay with Cobudget, because I know people are tired. Every year it's something new. It looks different. It's a different system, and I feel that I said, like, when I have to learn another one and find my way around. And I know that a lot of other people are also very tired of that. So I really hope that next year, because like it's the same as last year with just small changes, some small improvements, and not a whole new learning. So I think that will help us.
So having people getting used to it, I understand.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have one comment there, like what anything, and it's not really a change that we have done. It's something that's always been in Cobudget, but that I noticed in comparison to other platforms is really helping people. And that is that you can put up an idea by just having a title. You don't need anything else. You can just post like, oh, I want to do this thing. You don't even need to write a text or anything, and you can publish it. And that makes it so easy for people to really feel that they contribute, because some people don't really like writing text or making images and making budgets and these things. And just allowing everyone to contribute to the conversation that's easily is really like helping participation, at least in the workshops that we are doing.
So I really like when our platforms are integrated to our forum, which really enables us to ping people directly, both on the forum but on the platform, and that can really be a way to drive activity, because you can directly ping and link stakeholders to the conversation. So that's a feature that I really enjoy.
So opening the conversations to a wider audience by making use of
exactly. Or within the community, people can review the whatever it is to be budgeted, but they can also, maybe start a discussion about like one part of the application that maybe needs to be taken somewhere else in the beginning, but just like the accessibility is higher.
Cool.
Did you guys? Sorry, I have one question. Okay.
I have also a huge pack of questions here, but I'm obviously curious if you have any questions to Dani, to Wanda, to Jacob, to Diana, but also to Francesca and Hugi. Please just drop them in the chat and we will collect them and try to address as many as possible today. I'm very curious, Diana, so you shared initially that actually you have multiple use cases of Cobudget within Blivande, right? So I think it would be great to hear, like, what are those, if you could walk us through them. And specifically, I'm also curious because I heard that you also use it for actually curation of art and creativity. So that would be really interesting to hear how that looks like.
Yeah, so one of them we use right now Cobudget for 5 active spaces, almost 6. One of them is more traditionally our makerspace Cobudget. We have 5,000 crowns, that's around 500 euros per month, to distribute into buying new equipment or replenishing the sandpaper. It can really be whatever the members want to. And every member that is part of the makerspace can join the committee that gets funds each month. I'm also really excited to see if the new feature where people can pay will lead for some dreams to be paid earlier. So that's an interesting experiment. And then we use it for 2 projects a bit more as a curation platform. We have a small container gallery that is open for 12 different exhibitors each year, once a month. And people can apply through filling in the questionnaire of the co-budget, having a budget, having a concept, answering questions about how they're supposed to build up and also pack down the exhibition. And it has been a really nice tool because it allows for a direct dialogue between the artist or the person that wants to have a project and the curators, whereas in more traditional institutions, it is a one-way street. So you send in your idea, the doors are closed until you get your final say, yes, you got accepted, or no, you didn't get the funding. And what happens in the gallery is that it can be a dialogue. So we have had a few cases where it was like, your idea is quite good, but don't you think it would be nicer to evaluate it a bit further? I think a few cases got in, like the quality of the exhibition improved and they passed the curation process. And we do the same with container projects. So people buy their own containers and want to have a project. It can be an atelier space, it can be a small cafe, it can be a bike repair shop, or a dog grooming station. That's the newest one. So there's a lot of questions to be asked about, for example, water, electricity, who's gonna pay for it, the budget. People pay rent for the containers and buy the containers, but still there's a budget that needs to be considered, a plan, ownership. And also given that the people curating the square now have an extensive experience on how to do it, they can also come up with suggestions and ideas that otherwise would take a really long time to figure out in different documents. So it can be a direct dialogue. And also other people that already have their container units can start and chip in the conversation and see if they can contribute with knowledge or help or anything else. Yeah, that's the curation processes that we use it for right now.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Sorry, Danny, I cut you off before. You had a question to Diana, or was it?
No, actually to everybody else, because I just wanted to know where I sometimes struggle was that the invitation mails came from Cobudget, and these mails went directly into the spam. So I had to mail everything again, and look at the spam. It has to be something. Did you have the same experience or same struggle sometimes? Yeah. Okay. So that's something I think we have to be aware. If we invite people, spam systems are very, very good at the moment, and you have to find ways to announce. Maybe a mail will come, check your spam. So I had to write like double mails, triple mails, and to announce that it's come. That's just one other experience I had to do.
Thanks for the tip, Danny.
And we've had that issue a lot as well, and something that we've been playing around with a little bit is QR codes. So both in workshops as a way for people to just be able to sign up like via code, or also having posters. Basically, we're doing a test in a park here in Malmö now, where we have posters. Like, do you want to what ideas do you have for this park? It's a quite rundown and boring park. There's a poster with the QR code. You can scan the QR code and you send directly to the Cobudget page where you can post an idea. Ideally, in that flow, the user would be able to sign up like throughout that process, and that's not really like there yet. But that's something like I'm hoping the platform is getting to a stage where that's possible. Basically, it's a quite specific use case also, so I guess it's not really prioritized.
I mean, in your case, Jacob, you're actually working in contexts where people maybe are not so used to those exploratory and co-budgeting practices. I've also heard you working with this in an elderly home, right? So I'm wondering, like, what is maybe potential there, or maybe also challenges that you encounter there?
I think the biggest challenge, like the first biggest challenge, is to for people to realize, oh, I can actually like do something here. And that is like a lot of trust issues to come over, because most people think like, yeah, but this is just another of these idea exercises. No one is going to listen to these things and nothing's going to happen in the end. Why should I participate? And that issue is, of course, not in the tool itself, but in the process that is using the tool. So like, even if we create the perfect tool, like if the process can't really like account for that, it's still not going to work. And then the other part of the issue is like getting the people that are actually like holding the money trust that these people will do something good with it. Like, okay, why shouldn't we just take in like a landscaping firm to fix this park? Why should we let the inhabitants that live around the park be a part in fixing it? And like getting over that, that sort of flipping that switch is hard. But then the more good examples there are that we can point to, the easier it will become. So it's a slow process of like getting people more used to this, and we're going there.
Yeah, thanks for pioneering, because probably then also pioneering for other places, right? Yeah. Yeah, we heard a couple of numbers that you've been sharing before, Wanda. I mean, over 160 projects funded this year and more than 1,000 funders in total on the platform, I think. So what does it actually mean to work with those numbers?
So we had one problem with those numbers was some technical issues. That at the beginning, so we wanted to distribute all the funds we had to all the more than 2,000 members we have. And that did not work so smoothly. And then people panicked immediately 5 minutes after. It's like, I didn't receive any money. Doesn't it work? Help. And they were really like excited to start. It worked all out well in the end. But yeah, that was a struggle that caused a bit of stress in the community. And yeah, otherwise it's, as I said before, engagement to reach everyone at the right time. But that's just general communication problems. I mean, one thing that was nice also, what Diana mentioned with like commenting between each other, so that you can see the projects, and it also invites to like co-creating even more. Sometimes we had two projects that are similar, and they find each other and say, hey, shouldn't we collaborate? Shouldn't we merge this one dream into a bigger one? So that's nice about it.
Yeah, cool. And I think that's also what you were looking for, Dani, right? In your use case, you use it for like collaboration and for showcasing and cross-funding of actual impact initiatives. So what did you note there? Like, did you note like an increase of quality or impact through using a platform like Cobudget in your work?
Well, I'm a fan of copy paste, and if others had the idea, why do I have to invent the whole idea again? So that was happening with my employees. I mean, they realize who had a good idea, where is the knowledge. So it's more about knowledge transfer as well. So people see, oh, he's an expert on what to say, lynx or wolf or bear, and he has this project. I call him because I have the same problem, but a little bit different, in a different area or different, I don't know what. So they find each other through that project because they see, he has a project. But what is excellent as well in my case is that I have a major donor department in WWF Switzerland, and they go to this page as well, because most of them, they are smaller projects. They normally try to fund the big projects, but often they need small projects for smaller donors. And then they go on this page and say, yeah, it's a beautiful project. Do you need money? We can go and find the money for the project. So what happens is not the evolution of the project. I didn't realize that too much. But what I realized is that people have the knowledge exchange and the idea exchange. That was really cool. So others, they saw, oh, you have it. Can I look at the proposal, because in our case we write small proposals, and then they double check it. They try to adjust it to their region, and they have a new project and try to protect something or restore something or whatever. That worked very, very good.
Pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Brian and Stephanie, for your questions. We noted them down. And please, everyone else, if you have any questions to the panelists, but also to Hugi and Francesca from the Cobudget team, please just put them in the chat and we're going to address them now. Yeah, so Brian asked if there's any capacity building efforts on the front end. And I think you started responding, Francesca, in the chat. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, maybe you can just bring me back on. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I guess as I sort of said in the chat, like this is a good example where I think we can see how different organizations that have different things they're focusing on can contribute to the larger Cobudget vision. Because I think definitely like when I started working on it, I think one of the main insights that we had was like, man, a lot of the groups are not actually ready to do this practice. Like there's so many things we have to do beforehand around capacity building and actually like creating the foundations in terms of communication, decision-making, group practices for this to actually come in. So that's why actually Greater Than is like very, very focused on that work. And so we actually do quite a lot around also helping groups unpack their relationship to money, like individually and collectively, and also doing things like the money game. We can maybe drop that in the chat, which is a really great tool to help individuals unpack their relationship to money. So yeah, I definitely think it's important not to separate this one practice from everything else. Like it's really the best if it comes as part of a package of a lot of different work that's going on. And I just hope that there's many other groups out there that are wanting to do this work because there's so much of it that's needed. And so I think we'd be really glad if there was others that are also helping build that capacity. So more groups are actually ready to really jump into this.
David, you're on mute.
Thanks. You want to add to that, Hugi? I see you unmuted as well.
No, not really. I think no, I think that sometimes I can add to it actually. I think that sometimes a really good way to do it is not necessarily capacity build in the place in which it is most vital. I think the Borderland is a good example of that. You teach people how to think about these practices in a situation where the stakes are so low that the sort of risk of doing something wrong is low, right? And the consequences are low of doing something a bit wrong or not getting it quite right. But still the stakes are high enough that people actually care enough to invest something. And I think the Borderland is an excellent example of this. And what I hope is that by doing this with thousands of people at something like a participatory arts festival, people will take those practices with them into other situations where the stakes are higher, and they'll be equipped to do that there. So maybe that's something also to think about an organization where you start implementing this. Maybe don't start implementing it for the healthcare insurance plans, maybe start implementing it for something where the stakes are just relatively high, like the team building of the team or something like that. Start there and work your way up from there.
Thanks for adding. So there's a question from Stephanie. Is it all direct money raised, money spent, or are there any examples of a revolving fund where beneficiaries pay the money back and can be used again for impact? I'm just wondering, Stephanie, was your question directed to anyone in particular or just as a general question? General question. Okay, thank you.
So maybe one example comes to mind, if I understood it correctly, Stephanie. So I'll answer and then we'll find out if I did. So there's a web development co-op called Outlandish, and they've been using Cobudget for quite a few years now. And basically what they do is some of their work, they want to focus on social impact projects that basically generally they wouldn't have funding to do, or that basically the projects couldn't actually pay for their work. And so basically what they do is they have their paid services work, and then part of that basically goes into Cobudget and then they use Cobudget to basically allocate their own time towards then doing work on the sort of social impact projects. So what that means is basically they're sort of using it as a way to pay themselves to do a different type of work. And so, yeah, it's more like an internal reallocation. I don't know if that's a good use case, but I think there are quite a few sort of cooperative-like groups or collectives that use it to basically reallocate surplus, which is really quite different from like the borderland use case or some of the other ones here that we've heard, where basically the money that's being allocated has been generated by the people themselves that are then also gonna spend it on themselves, probably. So it's not like an external grant and then you're giving it to a project.
We in WWF Switzerland, we try to find new finance way as well, and to finance project differently, not only by donation, but also that they sell something or try to create new organizations, they offer a service, whatever. But what we don't do at the moment is that they have to pay back. So yes, we try to make them sustainable in the economic way, these projects. So they have their different financial sources, but at the moment they don't have to pay us back, for example, $5,000 or whatever we pay them. That would be maybe a next step, that we say, hey, we finance you and then you pay us back. But that's not at the moment, we don't do that.
Thanks, Danny. So anyone else would like to respond to a use case, a different one, like in response to Stephanie's question? Because if not, I'd like to get also Marianne's question. She's asking, what is the cost of getting started with Cobudget? We would like to set up a trial so we can see how it works and learn when organizations we can use it.
Well, I can answer that. The cost is zero. It's free at the moment. So what you do is you go on to Cobudget. There's a new website as of today. You just sign up, and then you press the Start Cobudgeting button, and that should be it. What you can do, which we'd of course recommend later, is that you can sign up for a group, and with a group you can have multiple what's called rounds with the same members, and sort of have them all bunched together, and that costs 20 euros per month per organization. And then even when we eventually enable this direct funding feature, if you have your own place in which to receive the money, it will also be free to do that. And then there's just a tip of each transaction for the direct funding, but also that tip can be set by the user to 0, but it's preset to 15%. So yeah, it's very easy to get started. We want to make it possible for everyone to start using it immediately and not having to pay anything upfront. So please just go ahead.
I would also just add, I guess it depends what you mean by cost, because maybe you weren't just talking about the software, because of course it takes time and investment from your team, and that is also an important resource. And I guess the other thing I would say is that there are some groups that are completely independent, and they can totally figure out how to set up their Cobudget process in a way that makes sense. But there are a lot of groups that like support with that, and that's also a service that we offer to basically help groups get going, because in many cases it's sort of like a question of participatory process design connected with some administrative and money flow structures that you need to sort of bring together to figure out what's the right way for us to get going. And we do have a bunch of free resources that we've created to help guide some of these, but that is definitely something that a lot of groups do ask for some extra support for. So I do think that can often help if you have some budget to get that.
Thanks. So yeah, engagement seems to be a huge topic today. Also, Stephanie is asking, are there any best practices for creating ongoing engagement, like rounds, creating a culture of regular participation in co-budgeting within an association or within one organization? Is there an ideal life cycle or spacing out of rounds without burning out the community?
I think I can, like, maybe Diana and I can answer a little bit for Blivande. So you can unmute yourself, Diana, and we can do it together. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just looking at our Tau co-budget, and we do it on a monthly basis. Yes, I do have to nudge people, but given that the Tau co-budget is basically giving a group of creatives money in their hands to put on tool that they want, the own incentive to actually decide which tool they actually were going to get first is quite high. When we had the vinyl cutter, for example, it took like 3 months to fund. And it was not such a little amount. It's just like all the energy went into the bucket. But yeah, like a funding of monthly rounds works quite well for that purpose.
I can say also that in the Blivande sense, you can create a bucket whenever. So the round is just ongoing. Whenever you want and think of something, you can go in and create a bucket. But then money is allocated every month. And I think a key thing there to prevent people from sort of burning out and getting annoyed by it is that it's sort of an opt-in situation where not everyone in the community gets the allocation, but everyone can opt in to be on the committee that gets the allocation. If you don't spend your money for a month, you then sort of get pinged and you probably get taken off that opt-in list until you decide yourself to, hey, I want to be back on. So that's a way in which to, like, you know, prevent that people build up a little bit of a built-in guilt about like, yeah, there's that money, I should probably go spend that. And then having that to be an ongoing thing every month, but they really might just not have time, right? So I think it's important to not expect everyone to participate all the time. That's not the way it should be. People have to be engaged in wanting to participate for this to work. It shouldn't be a chore.
How would this look like in a framing, like an event as you're doing, Wanda?
I'm hoping that we can combine it somehow, like the sign up at Cobudget, that we can combine it already with the membership buying process that you get in immediately when you get your membership, that you have like a link and already an account there that is not like one of these many things you have to do, but it makes it easier.
What I realized is that I could do the advertising, I could do the running around and talking about Cobudget, but now I started to train the ones who come with the project, because they say, I just put my project, my bucket on Cobudget and I don't wait. But that's not the way. You have to be creative. Make advertisement for your bucket, and that's really cool, because then they want the money, they want the feedback, and if they realize, oh, I have to be active, I have to call, I have to talk with this one, and maybe they support me, then the dynamic gets in, and that's what I realized. It's not me as a clown running around, and it must be from them, and then the dynamic comes. So that's why we also say you can bring in the project whenever you want. We have 2 dates per year where we say at that point we do advertising from ourselves, but you can come in whenever you want and you do your own advertising, and if you get the money, it's fine, and if something is left, we can check as well and see if we can help. But that's really cool. People start to do their own advertising for the project. Then it gets a little bit chaotic, but also dynamic, and that's what we like.
As you, Jacob, have experience in a lot of different use cases, do you feel like in the one with the city of Malmö, it's different with regards to timings or rhythm?
Those processes are quite controlled from the people that hold the process. So it really depends on what sort of, it's very different from group to group. For example, the workshops that we're having with kids, marginalized kids, we're meeting at the sort of place they hang out after school once every 2 or 3 weeks, and then they can come and like propose some ideas, and like sometimes there will be like 4 kids participating, sometimes there's 20 kids participating. But in those contexts, it's very different because the sort of expectation from them there doesn't really go outside of what they do in that workshop. So it's very, very different from the other context in this group right now. For example, for the elderly home, the old people are quite engaged in it, but they use it to sort of like plan fun like weekend activities and those things. And they just started using it. So we haven't really found a rhythm there that works well. But since it's an elderly home, my guess is that we will have a quite higher rhythm since it's not that much else that's happening always.
Thanks. Yeah,
I also wanted to add one more quick comment on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, quick.
Just also from the WeShare community, which I think that it can be quite good to try to connect the co-budgeting process with existing community rhythms and gatherings that are already happening. So like at WeShare, what we had done a few times is if we had a summit, which was like one of the big gatherings, we would maybe have like the brainstorming session for what buckets do we want live, and people would put them up there together and sort of kick it off. And so that really gives it momentum and doesn't like have it be a separate thing, but really be integrated into sort of an event that's already happening in your group.
Great, yeah. So I think we would have maybe time for one more question. Maybe let's take Peter's question here. Is there any thought or facility for accepting loan money rather than grants? I'm thinking of tapping the considerable amounts of money simply sitting in people's normal bank accounts. I think it's
it's a very good question.
Yeah,
it's a very good question. That's a good point. I think I haven't considered it. Certainly, it would be very interesting to have that sort of feature, so that somebody could come in a little bit like community-run Kiva, and somebody could come in and say, "Hey, I'm willing to lend, and I'm willing to lend at this interest rate," and for that then to go in. I suppose that's a whole set of different sorts of features, but I think it's a very, very cool idea, and we should look into it.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's not loans, but there is sometimes this dynamic that some groups use Cobudget more for pledging money rather than saying we already have this money and we're distributing it, but that people say, I'm willing to contribute X, but like the money's not actually there yet. So like they're basically sort of making a vouch based on money in their bank account. And so I guess you could sort of add to that dynamic saying, okay, it's a loan and here are certain terms. But yeah, it's really a great idea to explore further.
Okay. As we want to finish on time and keep the promise of finishing at past, maybe you, Francesca, would you like to give us a few closing words of like what to expect, what's next, and what follows after this conversation that we're having now?
Yes. So I guess as Hugi mentioned, we have our new Cobudget website live now. And there's going to be more coming in the next weeks. We are also planning on taking some of these questions that we've heard and generally thinking about more events that will be happening in the coming months to support groups that want to get started. But I guess one thing that I really wanted to leave you all with to just get an understanding of how we're actually organized is that after we got this great grant that Hugi found of this Swedish public money to sort of get us to where we are now with the platform that you can see live, basically all the work that comes now at the moment is building on sweat from us in the team to basically really go to that next step and actually do the work of bringing this practice to the groups and helping them actually do the co-budgeting. And so one of the things that we've really noticed there is that especially the groups that we think really need it and that we've seen this work so well in, and that once it sort of gets started, it really can become like a really fundamental like pillar of how these groups work, that they often don't actually have money to support or to contribute to the work that we would need to do to help them. So basically, I guess some of the call to actions that I want to leave you with that I've also just put on the chat is firstly, of course, sign up and get started on Cobudget if you're curious and want to try using it. And if you are interested in using the direct funding feature, you just need to get in touch with us and we'll activate it for you. The other is that if you want to support us as an individual on this mission of spreading this practice of co-budgeting more and being able to do capacity building with the groups that really need it, you can also back us on Open Collective. And we're also sort of to continue the tradition of Cobudget finding interesting ways to get money to do what it's trying to achieve. We're looking for open-minded, alternative philanthropic organizations and grants that might help us raise around 180,000 euros to sort of get to this next level with what we'd like to do with Cobudget. So we'd love any just ideas, introductions, contacts, and just want to invite you to email me and Hugi at the email in the chat, because that's something that we're really going to be focusing on in the next months. It's like how to get this software into the hands of the groups that really can benefit from it. And I'll leave it at that. Maybe Hugi wants to add a last word.
I could just pop in and say, like, I think it's such a great opportunity because it's so rare that you find these sorts of grants that allow you to build the tech and really focus on that without asking for really anything in return. These two grantors, Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency, and Kulturbryggan, Swedish Arts Innovation Agency, they've been really stellar in getting us here. So the platform has already been funded to the largest, to the most extent. So we're in this really great position where we could take any money that we get now, more or less, and really focus on the education mission and really focus on getting the practices out there with the tool that we built. And I think that that's such a privileged and nice position to be in. And I think we could really, really make a dent with that if we were to find that funding.
Yeah, thanks. Before we close, I'd also really like to say thank you to you, Dani, Wanda, Diana, Jacob, Francesca, and Hugi, to be here in the panel, to also take questions, but also to everyone else to bring your questions in, to holding this together and making this a really rich conversation. And simultaneously, or similarly as we checked in, we'd also like to check out together. And as we're still around like 30 people, probably handing the mic to everyone would take too long. So let's use the chat again and maybe phrase it around the question of like, I could now, after hearing all of this, imagine using Cobudget 4. So maybe there was something that came up here that really inspired you to think in other ways of this tool, or just a way to use the tool for the context you're living in. And please don't hit enter yet, as we do it the way as we did before in doing a chatterfall and all hitting enter at the same time. And thanks for putting us on gallery view again. Because by the time we hit enter, of course, you're also invited to unmute and say your goodbyes to everyone. So give me a thumbs up if you have your answer ready. Okay, I think some people are still thinking or indecisive. Don't worry, we don't have to turn this into a blog post. And if you have a camera, it would be really great for saying goodbye if we could see our faces before we leave. Okay. 1, 2, 3, let's hit enter together. 1, 2, 3. Personal projects, building up a local council, personal savings, still thinking. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining and for being here together with us and being on the journey with us. Have a wonderful day or evening, depending where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.